Hello there, everyone. I am your host, the Sea Monster, and I bid you all welcome to unscripted, perhaps edited down, heavily edited down, maybe even, but unscripted video nonetheless. That is in participation and in celebration of One Monstrous Moment, the Star of Ultra edition. Now, for those who don't know what One Monstrous Moment is, back in 2019, in commemoration of the release of Godzilla King of the Monsters, a fellow kaiju YouTuber named the Omniviewer had decided to start up a little movement called One Monstrous Moment that is similar to the One Marvelous Scene movements that went on earlier that same year in participation of Avengers Endgame. In this case, One Monstrous Moment was done in participation of King of the Monsters 2019. Anticipation, I mean. And I was one of those people that participated in this movement, although with my original YouTube channel, my old first YouTube channel, G4784. Then 2 years later, in 2021, the movement was started again. This time it was the Alpha Edition in anticipation of Godzilla vs. Kong. And I also partook in that event, but that time as this channel, Sea Monster Essays. And so now, another 2 years later, or just about that frame of time, the movement has started for a third round, and this time it is the Star of Ultra Edition. This time in anticipation of the release of Shin Ultraman, or at least the US release of Shin Ultraman. Now, I'm not really all that excited about Shin Ultraman. In fact, I'm not really much into Shin Ultraman. I've seen like a few bits of it here and there, but Shin Ultraman isn't really a movie that I'm like all that excited about. But I am excited to take part in this movement nonetheless. So for this particular instance, for the Star of Ultra edition, I won't be doing a Godzilla movie, pretty much, like I did the last couple movements. But this time, I'm actually going to be talking about highlighting a One Monstrous Moment, which is basically a scene from a kaiju film, whether it's involving monsters or even involving people, or it's a mix of the two, or what have you, that one would consider to be just an absolute favorite, or at least something that should be worth deeming as like a highlight of the kaiju genre. And so for my case, I am, at least for the Star of Ultra edition, I figured instead of doing Godzilla as I would usually fall back on, I have decided to talk about a scene from a movie that features both giant robots and giant monsters, concerning Ultraman and what have you. And of course, I'm going to be highlighting a scene from Guillermo del Toro's 2013 film, Pacific Rim. More specifically, what I would call Gipsy Danger's comeback in the Battle of Hong Kong that takes place in the middle of the movie. So, let's get into that. To set things up, basically we have two kaiju being sent by the precursors to attack Hong Kong. One known as Otachi, and one known as Leatherback. The Jaegers that had been sent to essentially quell this kaiju attack are basically being overwhelmed. Basically three of them. Two of them get totally destroyed, and another gets disabled by Leatherback's EMP attack. When all seems lost, and all seems to be extremely dire, especially with Otachi going after Charlie Day's character, Newt, we have the arrival of Gipsy Danger, piloted by Raleigh Brackett and Mako Mori, who are about to come in and whoop some kaiju butt. And we basically see the proceedings of that, where they defeat Leatherback and they defeat Otachi, pretty much with some close calls, especially with Otachi, but nonetheless, they rise up triumphant, thus marking Gipsy Danger making her big comeback. Especially after earlier in the film, when she was basically severely crippled at the beginning of the film, when Raleigh and his brother were piloting it, although it was after his brother was killed by a kaiju, pretty much, in that movie. And it was just Raleigh piloting the thing. I would consider the Hong Kong battle in Pacific Rim, that takes place in the middle, to not only be the biggest highlight of the film, at least in terms of its action sequences, but I would also consider, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people will agree with me, that it is one of the best action set pieces in a kaiju film or a giant robot film, period. I may not be like the hugest fan of Pacific Rim, perhaps I don't love it as much as most people, but there's no doubt that this sequence was absolutely a huge centerpiece that was very satisfying. Visually, it is gorgeous, especially with the lighting, with Hong Kong being extremely well lit to contrast with the dark, stormy rainstorms and what have you. You pretty much have the lights from the Jaegers going up against the blue lights of the kaiju. You pretty much have all sorts of variety of attacks from from the Jaegers and kaiju, where Gipsy Danger uses things from her pulse cannon to elbow rocket to the sword, and you have the kaiju also having a variety of attacks. Leatherback for being much more gorilla-like and for having much more mass and essentially more meat on his bones, as well as having an EMP blast. You have Otachi, who actually is smaller and more agile and having the most variety of abilities, from essentially a claw at the tip of its tail that can be used to crush the heads of kaiju, of Jaegers, to shooting out projectile vomit that's acid-like, to being able to sprout wings and be able to fly away, essentially, as it does with Gipsy Danger towards the end of the fight. The sequence is incredibly stunning, and it gives us a great showcasing of the Jaegers and the kaiju's great massive size, truly showcasing the scale and scope of this battle. Right down to Gypsy's constant shifting in gears and cogs and panels to pretty much compensate with any sort of movement. Not only that, there's some great moments that stick out, such as Gipsy Danger using a ship as a baseball bat, and even just sort of quieter moments, such as when Gypsy's looking for Otachi walking through the streets of Hong Kong, but while doing so in a careful manner, such as stepping over a bridge to reduce collateral damage. And you also have moments where Gipsy uses things like shipping boxes as a way to pretty much add a little more punch at Leatherback, as well as seeing Leatherback even use a piece of the environment of the shipping yard as a weapon. So the sequence has a lot of great moments, and the effects are incredible, and even for a movie that's 10 years later, or just about a decade old, still holding up to this day on the visual side of things. Not only that, but it also gives great catharsis for our two characters. Raleigh for pretty much essentially making up for his failure at the beginning of the movie, and Mako essentially avenging the deaths of her family. The fight scenes, both between Gipsy Danger and Leatherback and Gypsy and Otachi, also even have some funny bits of humor, such as when Gipsy Danger tries to punch at Otachi and misses, only for the fist to go through an office building, and pretty much stops just short at pushing a chair into a desk, thus setting off a little desk ball thing that just kind of bounces around. I'm not really familiar with what that thing is called, but essentially it's a funny little piece of humor added in right in the middle of the action. And not to mention the soundtrack by Raymond Djawadi, who is known for doing the soundtracks for Iron Man and Game of Thrones, also scores this scene extremely well, especially with the main Pacific Rim theme playing in throughout the sequence, as well as Otachi even having a very menacing theme as well. So long story short, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this scene other than that it is a great showcasing of Pacific Rim's action sequences being done very well, and also having some really good character stuff in there right in the middle of it. The Hong Kong battle in Pacific Rim, which more particularly Gipsy Danger's comeback, is pretty much among one of the best set pieces in not just the film, but also in all of kaiju media, and it's something which I would certainly call one monstrous moment. And so that pretty much does it with this video here that I got going on for the Star of Ultra edition of One Monstrous Moment. I would like to thank you all very much for watching this video, and I do recommend checking out other people's videos for One Monstrous Moment, as the Omniviewer will have put together a playlist with other videos, mine included, to be viewed for your pleasure. Once again, thank you all for watching, and until my next video or series, I will see you all later.